The next learning target that we're going to focus on today is I can solve multi-step equations that include the long fraction bar. Our first step is going to be multiply first to get rid of the denominator. Then we're going to check our solution after we've done the rest of the steps. So when you see a long fraction bar like this, and the variables with the numerator, order of operations actually tells us that we have to instead of divide first, we would actually have to add first because this is all part of the numerator of a fraction. So it's kind of like there are parentheses there when we see this fraction bar. And we know that the fraction bar means divide. So the inverse of division is multiply. So our very first step is multiply first to get rid of the denominator. We're going to multiply this side by 8. And if I multiply that side by 8, I have to multiply this side by 8. This is like multiplying by 8 over 1. So if you remember kind of some fraction rules from 5th grade, or from a prior year in school, you know that the 8's cross-reduce and kind of cancel each other out. So I'm just left with n plus 5 equals, and 4 times 8 is 32. Now it's just like solving a one-step equation. The inverse of adding 5 is subtracting 5. If I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. 5 minus 5 is 0, so those cancel out, and I can bring down my n. N equals 32 minus 5, which is 27. So now I can go back and check my answer to make sure it makes sense. 27 plus 5 is 32. 32 divided by 8 is 4, and so my answer checks and makes sense. N does equal 27. This next one says 3y minus 6 over 4 equals 3. Again, this numerator is all kind of grouped together, and we want to get rid of our fraction. We want to get rid of the denominator as soon as we can. We do that by multiplying by the denominator. The 4's will cross-reduce and cancel each other out, and then I can multiply the opposite side by 4 as well. Here I'm left with 3y minus 6 equals 3 times 4 is 12. Now I'm trying to get 3y all by itself, so I'm going to use the inverse of subtract 6. And I'm going to add 6 to both sides first. Negative 6 and positive 6 cancel. So I have 3y equals 18. The inverse of multiplying by 3 is dividing both sides by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. And I'm left with y on that side. 18 divided by 3 is 6. And I got y equals 6 as my answer. Now let's check and make sure it makes sense. I'm going to plug this in. 3 times 6 is 18. 18 minus 6 is 12. And then 12 divided by 4 is 3. So my answer checks and makes sense. At this point, I would encourage you to pause the video and try the next one on your own, and then replay the video to check your answer at the end. Hopefully you've tried this problem on your own and now you're just checking your work. When you see the fraction bar, your first thought should be to get rid of the denominator right away. And we get rid of the denominator, the opposite of divide by 3 is multiply by 3. So we multiply by the denominator on both sides. And we get 3 times 5 is 15 equals 7c plus 1 because these 3's canceled out. Now I'm trying to isolate my term with the variable. So the inverse of add 1 is subtract 1. If I do it to one side of the equal sign, I must do it to the other. 15 minus 1 is 14 equals 7c is what I bring down. And the last thing I need to do is isolate my variable. So the inverse of multiplying by 7 is dividing by 7. I do that on both sides and I get 2 equals c. I can rewrite that with the variable at the front and say c equals 2. And now I just want to make sure that my answer makes sense. I'm going to do it in my head. 7 times 2 is 14. 14 plus 1 is 15. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So my answer checks and makes sense that c is equal to 2.